stop recording by mistake. So let me do that. I want to stop sharing, not stop recording. So let me go back to that. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so now this is how that's how you make a pie chart. I mean, I put the screenshots in, hopefully that'll help you, but I still went through it as well. And again, you can also make these in Excel if you wanted to, okay? But here's another example. So let's suppose we had a survey, let's say we gave to 200 high school students, okay? Now, in the survey, you know, the students selected what their favorite class was, and we have the results here in this frequency table. Okay. So with this data, we can make a pie chart. I mean, this is the pie chart I actually made, as you can see, although it may not be the best because you can see here for this math thing, they don't have the numbers in there. Okay. But again, you can easily make this pie chart by just typing in this data, and then you just make it like we did before. Okay. So it's just another example. Okay. In fact, probably would be smart for me to make it for everyone, so let me do that. Okay. So I'm going to, again, go to Google Sheets, back and forth. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to type in the data from that frequency table. We have class, so we have math, social studies, we have English, typing everything in, physical education, science, foreign, making the columns a little bit different. There we go. We have frequency as well. So again, that's 18. So this is the data from the slides, from the notes, that is. Just typing it all in. You know, I just want to practice making these, okay? Now, again, we want to make this. So we go to data. No, not data, excuse me, insert, go to chart. Okay? Then we can go to chart type, go to pie chart, and we have it. But again, we can modify it a bit, right? To get what's actually on the slide, we go to customize, go to pie chart, slice label, right? We can have it tell it the value and percentage, as you can see. Make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And going back, go to legend for position, right? We could put it on the right, as you can see. We get actually something a little bit better because the numbers show up for math. So we get something like this. Okay. You know, the title here, frequency, is up there. So that's how we can make a pie chart. Okay. Are there any questions on this? I thought it'd be good to go through it, so. But now we're going to look at other stuff. All right. You know, this is why I recommend, I think in the syllabus I said to make a Google account if you don't have one. It's free to do, and you can get, you know, you can make all these kinds of charts, and you could save it. Okay. So, you know, it's good stuff to do. Very useful. All right. Now, let me stop. Okay. And again, let me go back to the notes. Okay. Here we go. So that was another example we did. I mean, the example from the Google Sheets, it was a little bit better because the data here is not in the, what do you call it, the blue slice for math. And this is just something else I wanted to point out with bar graphs. It's actually something that came up in the first time I taught this class. What can happen though when people make a bar graph is they can change what's called the baseline of the bar graph. Basically, the baseline is when the vertical axis starts at, is the number it starts at. Here, notice the baseline is 0, okay? Here's a bar graph for the same data, but notice now the baseline is not 0, it's 25. Well, notice how different the bar graph looks here, right? You know, this is something people might do to deceive you, okay? Maybe not with these categories, but, you know, they might say this category has a lot more, has a much, much higher frequency than this one, for instance, as compared to this one. And it's much bigger than this frequency, than the category here. You know, in other words, when they start the baseline at something besides 0, you can see that the difference in frequency is much bigger, much more than it actually is. Okay? Whereas here, if you start a baseline at 0, there's not as much difference in the frequencies in the categories. You know, I've seen graphs and charts in magazines where people would actually start the baseline at something besides 0 to distort the graph like this, to deceive you. There was actually one example I found online. I think it had to do with government spending on different categories. They did something like this to make it look like the government was spending a lot more money in one category than another one, right? So again, they might start the baseline at something besides 0 to show there's a lot more in one category than another. Whereas if you start the baseline at 0, you can see the difference is not as much. It's a form of deception people use. I just thought it'd be good to point it out. You know, it's something I presented to my students when I first taught this class. I thought it was a good idea. You know, so you gotta be on the lookout for when people misuse statistics and stuff like that. So, all right. So that's something I wanted to point out. So it's always good to start the baseline at 0 is what I'm saying. You may have to change the options when you make this in Google Sheets or whatever, but it's really good to start it at 0. You know, be honest. This I'm not really going to go into too much. I just want to briefly mention it. People do use this. It's called a pictogram. It's just basically a graphic where the size of the picture represents the frequency or the number of values being represented. They do an example in the book. It's really, you know, not something I really want to go into for time consideration. This can also lead to distortion, kind of like, you know, here we had distortion when the baseline did not start at 0. With a pictogram, there's also distortion that can occur. It's just something I wanted to point out. I'm not going to go into this, but they do it in the book though. Okay, so I figured now it'd be good to do some examples, more examples that is. You know, because that's how we learn, right, from examples. Okay, so for instance, let's say this was the data, and let's say, again, this is all made up data, it's not real. Let's say 20 college freshmen, a sample of them, right? We asked them what their favorite sport was, their favorite sport, excuse me. And our results we put in a frequency table, okay? Let's just say we did that. So of the 20 college freshmen, 5 said their favorite sport was football, 4 said their favorite was soccer, 4 said their favorite was baseball, and so on. Okay? From this table, we're going to do a few things. We're going to construct a relative frequencies table. We're going to make a bar graph. Again, using Google Sheets. We're going to make a Pareto chart. And then we're going to make a pie chart. And then after this, you'll get to try one. I figured it'd be good practice. So, all right. Okay, so first, let's make the relative frequencies table. You could actually make that in Google Sheets if you wanted to, but that's actually easy, right? Because you just basically take each frequency and divide by the total. And we said the total was 20, right? Because the sample was 20 college freshmen. So for this one, the relative frequency is 5 out of 20, which is 25%. Okay. You know, you can really express it as a percentage. 4 out of 20, that's 20%. Same thing over here. For the 2, for cheerleading, for 2, we had 2 out of 20, which is 10%. For basketball, there were 4. So again, 4 out of 20. And for swimming, 1 out of 20. So, okay. But this is something you should be able to do by hand. You know, it could be on an exam, hint, hint. So, okay. But if I did ask you to make the other graphs, like a bar graph or whatever, you can use Google Sheets. You don't have to draw it by hand. So, okay. Now for the others, again, you can use Google Sheets. Basically, you would type in the data, and these are the charts you would get. Here we have the bar graph. Okay, as you can see. Here we have the Pareto chart, right? Again, the Pareto chart is from the highest sorted to the lowest. And here, of course, we have our pie chart, excuse me. I mean, here we just have the relative frequencies, but you know, that's okay. Now, if we were to make it in Google Sheets, right? Let's go do that. Okay. Let me just pause the recording.